everyone. Happy Monday and welcome back to another episode of Pucks and Power Plays podcast. Pucks and Power Plays is brought to you by Boston Sports Entertainment Network. You can find BSEN at BSEN_617 on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And then you can also find them with an extra underscore in front on TikTok, so _BSEN_617. You can find the podcast at Pucks and PPs Pod on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. You can also find us on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you like to listen to your podcasts. And we do have a Discord. I realized I kind of forgot to post about the book of the month when I was debating between the two, so I've decided that the book for March is also going to be the book for May. If you haven't heard this before and this is your first time here, in our Discord we also host a hockey book club. So if you're interested in joining, let me know and I can send you the link for that. But we're just going to keep the book from last month for this month, and we'll have a new one for next month, I promise. We also talk trading cards and all things hockey there. So if you're interested in trading cards, let me know as well, and I can get you in. We also have, or at least I have, for some new trading cards, a bunch of PWHL cards to give away. So if you're interested, let me know. But I'm Liz, and you can find me at Liz__Fraser. And then, as always, we have the few quick little announcements to start an episode. Sorry, I'm trying to find one of them, and our little QR code isn't there, which is weird. I'm going to find where that went. But anyways, real quick, typically we have a QR code you can scan in the corner if you're watching, but because it's not here today, which whatever, you can go to BSEN. Yeah, wait, 1 second. I know the site. Okay, so BSEN617.square.site, and we have a bunch of merch over there. You can get it for anything related to any of the podcasts that we have, and if you're interested in other podcasts for different sports, you can check the bio on our Twitter for BSEN, and they will list every one of our podcasts that are there in there. So if you want to find someone for the Celtics or the Patriots or the Red Sox, which we might not want to talk about with how they're doing right now, but you can always check that out. But on there, we have merch for the podcast for all the Boston sports teams and just some other stuff as well. So it's really cool. And then on top of that, our podcast specifically has a partnership with Just Strong, which is a women's athleisure company all about uplifting women and making sure they feel good and comfortable in their bodies. So if you go to us.juststrong.com, you can use our code PUCKS103975 for 10% off your order. And for that fun little wrap up, we are now into the episode. So, real quick before we get into all things Bruins, I want to say a quick thing. If you can't tell by me mentioning PWHL and this jersey right here, and maybe this super cool hoodie, the Fleet recently just played a game at TD Garden on Saturday. Oh my gosh, it feels like Saturday. It feels like forever ago at this point. Against Montreal. That game was amazing. It was a sold-out crowd. The first time we've had a women's hockey team professionally play at the Garden. It was fantastic. If you guys haven't seen clips or anything from that, you definitely need to check it out. The vibes were amazing. I feel like I've never seen the stands. Like, everyone was there for puck drop. And normally you'll still have people like at a Bruins game just still starting to trickle in. But like everyone was there. Everyone was ready for puck drop. It was just an overall amazing experience. I am so happy with the way the league's been able to grow within this past year. So it was really nice to see that and be able to experience it firsthand. And it was really also just between the two teams as well, the top teams in the league with the top goaltending. Fantastic game. 1-0 game. Maybe I would have liked it if Boston won, but I can't complain too much. But now on to the Bruins. After that small little quick spiel. We're in the playoffs, guys. Don't know how we did it. We can thank the Devils for it because they dragged us kicking and screaming into these playoffs. because I'm sorry, how do you make the playoffs on a 5-game losing streak? You don't unless you're the Boston Bruins, and the Devils are there to get you right in. So thank you to the New Jersey Devils. I say this now, I was a Devils fan for one day and one day only. That has ended. Once we clinched the playoffs, we clinched on Saturday. So thank you, Devils. They beat the Flyers, Detroit. I don't remember what team, I'm not going to lie. And I kind of feel bad about that. We're just going to look real quick because it was Detroit. Cool. I remember teams, guys. I promise. It's been a long day. But I won't be a fan of them tomorrow when we have to play them. But I can thank them. They got both us and Ottawa into the playoffs. Basically, almost the entirety of the East is set up with the exception of the third spot in the Metro. And then the West is slowly starting to become a team. They have a lot more teams in the playoffs now. They have 2 spots remaining with the bottom wild card and the bottom Pacific. The Sharks do face elimination tonight, and it's very crazy when we've been talking about this, I feel like for a month now, when you look at the standings. There are teams that were right there, either in the wild card or right under the wild card, that aren't there anymore and are facing elimination and or are eliminated. The Sharks are one of those teams. I feel like they've been in and out of the wild card, and now they're 5th right now in the wild card race. It's very unlikely they're going to make it in. Seattle fell to 7th. They were one of the other teams that were kind of there for the wild card race, and they're eliminated now. So it's very interesting to keep an eye on of how close everything has been to then just be like, oh, nothing's actually as close as we thought it would be. But right now, the main battle going on is between the Flyers, or the main battle in the East specifically is going on between the Flyers, the Capitals, and the Blue Jackets. I'm just going to pull up and share my screen for this real quick because it's a lot. Well, it's not, but it is. Oh, I hit the thing. Okay. So right now, the Flyers currently have the playoff position of being 3rd in the Metro with 94 points. Right below them is Washington. However, the Flyers have the advantage of having a game in hand on both Washington and Columbus. So if they win one, it's over for both teams. The Flyers will make the playoffs. Washington needs a win and for the Flyers to lose in order to jump in. They, I believe, also have the tiebreaker, so technically they could just get 1 point and make it in. Columbus also has the tiebreaker, so they could just win in their last game and end up making it in. I don't know off the top of my head who the Flyers play for their remaining games. Same with Columbus and Washington, but it would be interesting if some of them played each other. I think that would be fun, but who knows? Okay, so the Flyers are currently playing right now. They are tied 2-2 against Carolina, and they are in the 3rd period right now. They came back from being down 2-0 at the end of the first to tie it up in the 2nd period. So that's an interesting game. And then I don't think the next game for the Flyers is against the Canadiens, and then the Blue Jackets and the Capitals play each other. So if the Flyers lose, that's going to be, I feel like, a very fun game to watch with these two teams fighting for their playoff spot. But otherwise, the East is set. I'm excited for it. We have Buffalo and Montreal that are kind of in that weird back and forth of where they are. I'm kind of hoping, I'm not going to lie, that we get to play Montreal out of these teams. So right now, in the East with the way it is, I know what to click, don't worry. Carolina is playing the bottom wild card, which is Ottawa. And then as of right now, we're facing Buffalo. I would love to have a Boston-Montreal round 1 playoff series. I feel like that'd be a lot of fun. We'd have the rivalry in it. Not that I have anything to say against Buffalo, but I feel like out of those 3 teams, Buffalo's at the very bottom of my list. And I think Montreal has to be my number 1 just for the rivalry, while Carolina's just like, they're a fun team. I feel like we've played them in the playoffs. I want to say twice within the last 5 or 6 years, give or take. Don't quote me on it. I know it's just happened twice. I believe one of them was during the COVID season where we were in the bubble. And then the other one was, I want to say, the 21-22 season. And we lost that one. But I could be wrong. You know what? You guys can be here as I look this up real quick because I'm curious if I'm right or wrong on this. Give me one quick second to look this up. Yes. Okay, so we played them in the first round in the 21-22 season with Carolina winning in Game 7. That was overall, I feel like, a very fun, high-scoring series looking at it with every game, with the exception of Game 3 and Game 7. The winning team had 5 goals. Bit crazy, not going to lie. But I believe we've also played them before as well, but I could be wrong. Playoffs, that's what I want to look at. Okay, so we also had faced them. It was in the 1920 season where we won in 5 games. So we have that. And then we played them in the 18-19 season in the conference finals where we swept them because Carolina just can't make it out of the conference finals. That's the thing for them with them being swept. Whatever, it is what it is. But I feel like that's a fun matchup with that type of history as well. I also feel like it would probably be better for Buffalo to not necessarily play Tampa, but I feel like there'd be more fun there. But also Tampa-Montreal has been really fun this season. If you guys haven't been paying attention, they've been kind of going crazy in their past 2 games. Last game was insane, but the game before that kind of started all this craziness. So they played March 31st for the 3rd time this season. First period was kind of heavy with penalties, 3 on each side, only one that came out for matching with a goaltender interference and a roughing. Second period was normal. And then the third, the amount of roughings, cross-checks, boardings, it was crazy. There was a total of 32 penalty minutes for Montreal and 30 for Tampa. And in their game on the 9th a few days ago, first period wasn't too bad. Second period went freaking crazy. Oh my gosh. There was game misconducts, there was fights, we had instigators, we had goaltender interference, a bunch of roughing, a bunch of misconducts. Overall, that for penalty minutes, Tampa ended with 71 and Montreal ended with 55. So, as much as it would suck to potentially play against Buffalo, and in this scenario, I would rather play Carolina and have Ottawa play Buffalo, I would love to see a Tampa-Montreal series. I feel like that'd be a very fun one, and I don't know if I would rather see that in the first or second round, and I'd rather have like the Boston-Montreal one in the first round or maybe a second round, but who knows? I also believe the why can't I think of the name? The playoff brackets are going to be live soon. But the bracket challenge, I might just post a link to it with a little thing of like joining one for the podcast for fun, and we'll give out something for a winner. I feel like it'd be a fun way to go from having fantasy to then having the playoff bracket. But as of right now, we're playing Buffalo, which again, Ottawa and Carolina are playing each other. The Penguins and the Flyers will play each other. That one's fun just for the rivalry between those 2 teams. So, Battle of Pennsylvania in the first round, not mad about it. And then again, Montreal and Tampa. Here we go. So you guys can see. And then in the West, we would have Colorado and the Kings, which I feel like we see almost, maybe not every year, but it feels like a very popular matchup for the West. We have Dallas and the Wild, Vegas and Utah, which congratulations to Utah on clinching the playoffs. Super happy for them. Had a feeling they would. So, woo. And then we have the Oilers and the Ducks. I'm not going to lie, seeing some of these teams in the playoffs is bringing me back to being a kid where I'm like, oh, Buffalo's in the playoffs. The Ducks are in the playoffs. And not, I don't know, like Nashville or Washington or some of these other teams. So it's fun to see teams that haven't had a chance make it back in. It's also very interesting to see the teams that haven't made the playoffs, considering there's no Toronto this year, which we've seen for years at this point. There's no Washington this year. Islanders are out, but I feel like they've always been that team that's either just made it or they just missed the playoffs. Again, in the West, you have Nashville, who pretty much came up. They still have a chance to make it in. They're 1 point behind the Kings right now, but you're missing Winnipeg. You're missing the Blues. Vancouver's at the bottom. You have a potential chance for the Sharks, which seems unlikely, but they have that very slight chance of making it in. So there's teams we haven't seen for a while that I feel like are going to be very fun, and it's going to make this a very interesting playoff series. And overall, just playoff run. I will say, if the playoffs start with the way they are, I'm not going to make my predictions of what I think here because obviously this could be wrong and my feelings might change come playoff start time when suddenly we see like, hey, this guy's done for the season or there was an injury in this last game or something. But I would love to see a Boston-Montreal round 2. I have a feeling Carolina's probably going to make it back to the conference finals and just kind of dip there again like they typically do. Now, do I think Boston's going to win the cup? No. Will I say Boston's going to win the cup? Probably, because I'm a bit insane, not going to lie. And I'm a Boston fan, so I always have 2 brackets. I have my hopes and dreams, which is Boston going all the way. And then what I think is actually going to happen we'll probably make it to the second round. Depending on the team we play, maybe the third round. But probably the second. I am like 80% certain we'll make it out of the first round. Again, depends on opponent, but I think that'd be fun. And then outside of playoffs and all these fun potential matchups, which we can also get into like a lot more depth with like, you know, how series have gone as well, which is something I would like to recap just within those top 3 teams that we have the chance of going against. We do have the past week of Bruins hockey to do a quick recap over. But I also need to find super quickly what day this happened on. So ignore my mouse if you hear it for a quick second while I so quickly scroll through the Bruins social media page. Oh, we also have had players who have been nominated for trophies. These are typically players where you'll have someone from every team and you'll get the huge list. But McAvoy was nominated for the Bill Masterson Memorial Trophy. And then Harris was nominated for... So sorry, guys. Bear with me for a second as I try and find it. We'll get to the big topic in a moment. Don't worry. But Harris was our nominee for the King Clancy Memorial Trophy. So I think he's done a lot of great stuff, and he's a great fit for Boston this year for what they're going, or for their nominee specifically is what he's been great with that. I understand there wasn't much he could obviously do on the ice with this injury, but the fact that while injured and while recovering and while you'll see him in like the boot or when he had the scooter in some of these earlier ones, how he's still helping out within the community it really just speaks to who he is as well. But to start the week, if I can find the day. So to start the week, we have to start off on Tuesday, the 7th. We played Carolina that day. We were in Carolina for that game. It was our final game against them. They ended up winning that game 6-5 in overtime. In one of the most probably insane games we've had this year, Morgan Geeky came back, and he came back to prove that he was Morgan Geeky. Man scores again, and scores once more for a hat trick. Which, like, hey, even if we didn't win, I will take that because he's been back, and I am so excited. I'm not gonna lie. But we had the first goal in that game from Hampus Lindholm, which I feel like a lot of people didn't have on their radar. It's only his 5th goal of the season. After that, and mind you, by the way, we're starting in the first period. Carolina has 2 goals, followed by Geeky's first 2 goals with Pasta's 70th assist, which, again, 5 goals in one period is like, holy crap, insane. After that, we hit the second period. Carolina ties the game on a power play goal. Then they have two more goals to make it 5-3. Geeky scores to make it 5-4 and gets his hat trick. Zadorov hits his 20th assist of the season. And we end the second period. We get to the third, and Zaka scores his 30th of the season. This is the first time he's had 30 goals in one season in his career. So woohoo. Very happy for him. McAvoy and Arvidsson with assists, and we made it all the way to overtime. I'm not going to lie. This game did not feel like one the Bruins necessarily should have gotten a point out of. Yes, with the way they came back and played. Fantastic. Loved it. We had the Geeky hat trick. But overall, it very much felt like Carolina kind of had this control of the game, and we just kind of slipped in where we were like, hey, guess what? We want a point, guys. This is actually something for us and not just for you. But it felt like Carolina outplayed us, which I'm not going to say I'm surprised about. If anything, we did beat them in the faceoffs, which was great. But if you look at like the shots on goal, Carolina had 41 that game and we only had 21. So again, very much felt like we were outplayed. When you look at it by periods too, we never had a period where we had more than 10 shots. The most shots we had in a period was in the second with 9, while they had 15. They had 12 or more shots every single period, with the exception of overtime where they only had 1 shot, which I'll get to that in a second. But the first period, they had 13, 15 in their second, and then 12 in their third. And then overtime with their 1 shot. I believe this was the game where we started with the puck and kind of played around, and then it just didn't work, and they got it. And, like, I feel like I knew the moment they had the puck that it was just over, which isn't a great feeling to have. I'm not going to lie. But we ended that game on a loss. It was what it was. And then I will say, I know we talked about it on the podcast because I recorded that day. The team very much looked like they had more energy than they had in past games. So I think the fact that Geeky had his goals, we came back to hit overtime and even get a point out of that game, comes down to the fact that Sturm decided to cancel practice that morning and gave the team a bit of a rest. I think that was extremely beneficial for them, especially with the fact that they had played 4 games in 6 days at that point, and we're doing a bunch of traveling. This was all during our road trip. So, and it's not like the places were necessarily like, oh, we're doing a West Coast trip and we're in California for 3 of those games. They're not in the same state. So I feel like you saw that they needed the rest, which was great because then our next game after that wasn't until Saturday. But before we can get to that, we have to go to the following day on the 8th. At 4:00, we officially signed James Higgins to a 3-year entry-level contract. So he is now up with the Bruins wearing number 44. He's been practicing with the team his first day of practice. was on the 9th. It seems like he is clicking. And then, I'm not going to lie. Oh, we ended up then on the 10th, before we get to what I was going to say I'm not going to lie about, and the 11th, we sent Reichel back down to Providence, which again, at that point, he couldn't play any more games without being a regular call-up, so it kind of made sense. You're not just going to keep him there to practice and not do anything. You're going to send him back down. So, not mad. But the following day, we had a 12:30 game. We were back home, and it got announced. I don't necessarily remember if it was that morning or the night before that Higgins wasn't going to be playing with the team, or wasn't going to be playing that day because he needed time to get used to the system, which I know a lot of people weren't happy about because they're like, well, what are these guys like? I'm using our fourth line, for example, because this is what I mostly saw it about. But a lot of people were like, oh, what does Kastelic do that he can't do? Or what does Corrali do that he can't do? And guys, hate to say it, there is an answer. Our fourth line is there to fill this grit role. They're not there to score goals. If they score goals, have an assist, fantastic. That is a bonus on top of what their main goal is. Their main goal is to be these physical, gritty guys on the ice. And when you put Higgins in your lineup, that's not what you want from him. You want him to be this goal scorer, you know, this guy who's going to get points, who's going to be out there offensively all the time. And you're not necessarily going to get that 24/7 with our fourth line and with what their goal is. So there's roles for everyone in this team. You're not just going to be like, hey, let's take out the grit guy, put this guy who's supposed to be here for goals and expect him to start playing differently than how he's supposed to play. So, again, there's a reason. But also on top of that, besides just needing to learn the system and click with the team a bit more, there's also the way we've been playing against Tampa that's been a bit scary, not going to lie. Or not necessarily scary, but it's been a lot more physical. They also had just gotten off the game with Montreal where they had the 71 penalty minutes. So I feel like that's not the game you necessarily want to be like, hey, kid, welcome to the NHL. Potentially go get hit and maybe even hurt in this probably very physical game. Now, did that game turn out to be as physical as I thought it was going to be? No, not at all. There was only 50 hits throughout that entire game, 27 of them coming from Tampa, 23 from Boston. I thought it was going to be a lot more hit heavy, probably a fight or two, and we really didn't see anything. Granted, you didn't really see many penalties that game, but actually, I have someone who probably has something to say about that real quick.
What?
Do you have something to say about the penalties or lack thereof in the Tampa game?
I think they forgot they were on the job.
Hope you guys know. I knew he had strong opinions. I had to get him for that one real quick. But that game was weird. Nothing happened in the first period. We also went the first, I believe, 9.5 minutes of play without a whistle, which, like, I'm sorry, what? That felt insane. Because it was the day the Fleet played and it was hockey day in Boston. I was also at this game, so I'm not going to lie. I don't think I fully noticed at first, and then I kind of glanced up and I was like, there's been 6 minutes and no whistle. And so I kept looking up every once in a while because I'm like, this is getting interesting. But, like, it didn't necessarily feel back and forth in that sense of, like, there were opportunities. It just felt more like they were skating on the ice. It was like, yeah, obviously they're skating. But I don't know if you guys know what I mean by that necessarily, but it just felt like they were kind of going and not, playing. I don't know if that makes sense. That's how my brain just kind of went with it, so I'm so sorry if it doesn't. But in the second period, Morgan Geekie had another goal, and McAvoy had his 50th assist. I believe this was the first time he's hit 50 assists in a season. I'm going to double check that real quick. Yes, this is the first time he's had 50 assists in a season, and also the first time he's been above 60 points in a season. So, woo! But Geeky's now at goal 38. He's currently at 67 points, so theoretically, if he gets 3 points tomorrow, he can still be a 70-point player. And I'm not going to lie, I'm still going with Geeky as a 70-point player. I think he can do it. If he's playing tomorrow, that is. But he doesn't even need 3 goals. He can just have 3 assists. I don't care. I just need 3 goals from the Bruins. And I need him to be involved in all of them. But the second basically ended with a 4-on-4. There was a penalty for Tampa and a penalty for Boston as well that was called at the same time. Because, yeah, we kind of tripped a guy. But then we got thrown to the ice. So, aggressively thrown to the ice. So, they got a penalty too. But going into the second period, or the third period, fun fact, were penalties. We got called for a penalty for a hold. That kind of happened all game. That, I saw a replay at one point where Zaka did it, and I was surprised it wasn't called. And then I'm assuming it was called to kind of be like, hey, maybe tone it down. Let's not let things escalate, because we already had a guy kind of get thrown to the ice, and hoping that something like that wouldn't happen again. But then we don't call anything else until the final 33 seconds. So, I don't know, man. I don't blame the refs, but it's weird because I'm not going to lie, Boston also committed a few other penalties since then, and so did Tampa. So I was just a bit confused on what we were and weren't calling that game, because it was there's a cross-check that we just committed, there's a cross-check they just committed, nothing's getting called. It was very weird. Also with high sticks, but I'll get to that one in a second. But Tampa ended up scoring to tie it 6.5 minutes into the period. And then I believe they scored after to get the go-ahead goal with about a minute remaining. About a minute and a half remaining. They scored. I want to say this was within a minute or two of Corrali getting high-sticked in the offensive zone in front of the ref and there being no call. And then following this, following the goal, McAvoy also got high-sticked in front of a ref without a call. So, not a fan of that. Also, poor McAvoy at this point with getting hit in the face. This man can't catch a break. I'm not saying he needs the bubble again, but, someone just needs to cut him some slack. Maybe don't hit him in the face. Would kind of be nice. But Boston have finally got a power play in the final 36 seconds or so. And unfortunately, they could not capitalize on it. And they ended up losing 2-1 in regulation to Tampa. If we had, obviously, we ended up clinching later that day, because I believe it was the Islanders had lost and then Detroit ended up losing. But if we had won, we would have made it then and there. We wouldn't have had to rely on other teams. And luckily, we were able to rely on other teams. So it worked out in our favor. Then the following day, we were going to Columbus for a 6 o'clock game where we played the Blue Jackets for our final time this season. This one, I think, was very interesting. We ended up sitting a few players, and Hagens officially had his first game. I'm pulling up the players we sat real quick. I'm so sorry, guys. We ended up McAvoy, Hampus, Lindholm, Arvidsson, and Zaka were not playing that game, so our lines looked a little bit weird. Jeannot also wasn't in our lineup for this game. I believe he was the healthy scratch. But also earlier that day, before the game started, back on Saturday, we recalled Reichel again. So, back up with the big club. Woo! But our lines for the game yesterday looked a bit weird, a bit different than normal. We had geeky Lindholm Pasta, as always. And then we had a second line. That is not our normal second line at all. Poor Middlestat being the lone second line. Our second line player there, just like, oh, all of his buddies are gone, and we had that one line that was clicking so great. And now he's paired with Reichel and Isamont. I was a bit surprised Isamont was still playing. I'm not going to lie. I was like, oh, he's in the lineup. Granted, I didn't think his game against Tampa was horrible, but at the same time, wasn't the biggest fan. We had a third line that I absolutely love, by the way, of Hagens, Mitten, and Kuznetsov. I know I was kind of talking. I don't know if I mentioned it on here of like where I would place him and how I felt like that would be a potential fun line because they're players around his age who are also fast and like kind of have the same responsibility as him, but they're not necessarily pastas, so they're not like, you need to do it. But I was also a bit worried because they are all pretty young. That line averages out to 21 years old because we have a 23, 19, and 21-year-old on that line. So I was like, they are young. It could be a bit iffy, but also it could be a lot of fun. And I really liked the way they played. And then we had the fourth line of Steve's Corrali Kastelik. Obviously, Corrali Kastelik, they've been playing together all season. They've been great. And then we just put Steve's there. Our D, I'm not going to lie, staring at those lines kind of scared me. Kind of stressed me out a smidge bit. We had Zadorov, Jokiharju, Aspro, Harris, and then Mason and Peak. And Corpy was in net. There is the chance if he is getting traded this offseason, that was most likely his last game in a Bruin sweater, if he is. I know the rumors have kind of picked up a bit, especially with the fact that he's going into, I believe, the third year coming up next season of his contract. So theoretically, he might be traded if they want to give Swayman a bigger workload for next season. So I think he did great. And that's all I'm going to say. We'll get into it more if he does eventually get traded. But for now, it might not be his last game because who knows, comes playoff time and all the fun stuff. But that game, we let in a goal in the first period before Corrali scored his sixth of the season. Initially, this goal was given to Kastelik because he had tipped it, but it went off the tip of Corrali's foot, so it ended up actually being Corrali's goal instead of Kastelik's. So that was fun, especially because it felt so bad. Poor Kastelik thought he scored it and had his 10th of the season, and then it actually went to Corrali. Then in the second period, with under a minute remaining, Jokiharju scored his second goal of the season. If you have not seen his celly, he essentially did what Corrali does, so a corral leap into... But it was... If you haven't seen the video, you need to find it up because it's so funny. Because obviously he scores, and then he's just kind of standing there because he doesn't know what to do. It's like a full like a buffer in his brain as he's thinking about it. Turns around and just jumps on the boards right there. And I absolutely love it because you can see him processing and being like, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what I'm supposed to do in this situation. But I think it's great. Very fitting with the fact that Corrali also had scored the first goal. And he had the primary assist. But the bigger one to look at is Hagens had the secondary assist. He helped set up the play for that goal and had his first point in his first game as a Boston Bruin. Very exciting. I feel like he did great. It's also very funny if you end up looking at the penalties. We never got a power play that game. I don't have opinions on that one. Thinking back, I might. I don't know if I necessarily remember, but I know I just kept making jokes that we weren't going to get one, and then we never actually got one. But in the first period, with under a minute to go, Hagens got called for a hooking coil. And I think it's great that in his first game, he had a penalty and a point. So he kind of made up for it. Definitely helped that they didn't score on a power play. But going into the third period, about a minute and a half in, the game was tied. Of course, a former Bruin had an assist because I swear we're cursed against former Bruins, not going to lie. Every time we play them, they have to score on us. At least one, if not more. But then, roughly 9 or so minutes later, Kastelik actually properly had his 10th goal of the season, with Corelli having another assist to put him up to 14, and Harris having his second assist of the season. And the game ended, and the Bruins broke their 5-game losing streak with a win against Columbus in a very exciting, very fun game. I feel like, honestly, that game wasn't horrible. I very much liked it. I love how our fourth line was just kind of the line for the game. Corrali having 3 points, contributing to each of the goals was great. Kastelic contributing to 2 of them. The fact that combined they had 5 points. I think it was great that our fourth line was just there and was able to have a very good game, especially with no offense to anyone who might complain about them. But obviously, we don't know if they see it. Sometimes players will see stuff like this. But with all the discourse going on about the fourth line right now on Twitter about how, well, what do they do that, again, Higgins, Patra, all these guys don't do? I feel like it was very fitting that they had that type of game after all of those comments were coming out the day before. So I'm proud of them. I think it was great. We also, looking at ice time real quick for that game, was very interesting. We only had 2 defensemen with over 20 minutes. We did have one that was close to hitting 20, but Zadorov, obviously, I feel like you knew would have the most time on ice with 23-27. Then it was Peak with 21-35, which kind of surprised me when I first looked at it. But then I realized with the fact that we were shorthanded 3 different times that game, that probably contributes to it, because you're not going to have like Mason out there for a power play when you don't have a power play. But when you're shorthanded, obviously Zadorov and Peak are going to be on the ice for you. So that wasn't too surprising. And Jokiharju, again, with the fact that we killed 3 penalties, wasn't too surprising at 1957. Aspro only being at 1721 did surprise me, because I feel like he was literally out there. Like, I want to say the second period, I felt like he was out there every other minute just on the ice going around. I noticed him multiple different times. So I'm surprised his time was as low as it actually was. But going into our forwards, I'm also kind of surprised by the ice time. Obviously, the top line's going to all be roughly the same, about 1650, give or take, on ice. We had Lindholm leading the forwards with 1651, Geeky at 1649, and Pasta with 1645. Not super surprising, but I think the players that then had the next amount of time was pretty interesting. Obviously, your top guys are getting played, but then it to be your like top 4 penalty killers was great, especially when 2 of them contributed a lot. So Mitten was actually the 4th highest player in terms of forwards with 1553. Husnudinov at 1538, and then Kastelic at 1512 before you get to Corelli at 1454. Higgins ended up playing 13 minutes and 8 seconds on ice. He had the 4th lowest amount of time on ice. Our forward with the lowest amount was Asimont with 10:35, which I'm not going to lie, thought it was lower. I didn't even realize he hit 10 minutes on ice, because I feel like I didn't notice him that much. But in his first game, Higgins was a +1. Obviously, he had his penalty. He had 19 shifts, which was the 3rd highest in terms of forwards. The highest was Elias with 21, and then Husnudinov and Mitten with 20. And then Higgins, Kastelic, and Middlestat all had 19 shifts. So he was up there in terms of getting the most opportunities out of everyone. While he might not have stayed on the ice for as long, he still was given a decent amount of shifts to play out this time. He also had his 1 shot. But outside of that, I think that was like the big thing. And then also just in terms of, if you want some quotes from Sturm real quick, I will pull those up. But if I could find it, it would be great. I'm so sorry, guys. Oh, also, real quick while I'm scrolling to find this, another hockey news as of today. Jonathan Quick announced that tonight is actually going to be his final NHL game, which is like insane. I swear he's always been around for as long as I can remember. So seeing him retire is really just bringing the fact that like all the players from my childhood are actually just done, and it's making me really sad. I'm not gonna lie. On the topic of Higgins, he is confirmed to be playing for tomorrow. I found, where is it? So Sturm expects that several players who were out of the lineup yesterday are going to be playing against New Jersey tomorrow. So we'll probably see McAvoy and Lindholm back in the lineup. I don't necessarily know. Probably, I want to say Zaka, I feel like, because he typically always hits all 82 games in a season. But if it is due to some type of like nagging injury or something, or just a bit of soreness, I can also see him being rested tomorrow just to be safe come playoff time, considering he has been one of, if not the best players since the Olympic break. So rest him if he needs to be rested. And then there's a quote from Sturm on if Higgins will be in the playoffs, if he'll be in the playoff lineup. And the quote is, "We'll see. I'll give him another crack at it tomorrow. He'll play, and then we'll decide. Who we're going to play in round one might be in play too. You never know. He's definitely going to play tomorrow," which I feel like makes sense. Depending on the team, if it's going to be super physical, super gritty, might not be the type of guy you want to have in the lineup versus other guys that we have. But I could also see, depending on the team, like maybe with Carolina, I feel like I'd play him. I don't know if I play him more with Carolina or Montreal, but definitely, yeah, I feel like more with Carolina than with Montreal. I'm not going to lie. I don't know why, but I feel like it's more fitting with how Carolina plays, with how he also kind of has played. Granted, it is a small sample size of the one game with Boston, but that's what I'm feeling. And then trying to see if I can find the quotes quickly. I'm just so sorry, guys. Yes. So Stern about Hagen said he thought he looked great. He didn't think he made any mistakes. He also liked his line mates. I thought all three of them connected really well. They have good speed and they're in the same age group. They weren't afraid to move the puck and they did a lot of good things. So I really enjoyed watching and being part of James' first NHL game as a Boston Bruin. I agree. I think they did pretty well. I don't necessarily think there was any mistakes. That penalty was just a penalty. Feels like a simple penalty that we see with the Bruins all the time, so it felt very much in place to happen in his first game. I've said it. I like how he clicked with Mitten and Husnudinov, and I'm hoping we're going to see that line again tomorrow. We also haven't seen anything else about anyone else being called up, so I don't know if it's just going to be a situation of like the guys who weren't in the lineup are going to maybe replace a guy or two to give them a game off. Like maybe Pasta won't play and we'll put like, I don't know, Arvidsson or Zaka back in the lineup for him. Maybe give Geeky a game off. I don't necessarily expect to see what we saw last season or what some teams do, where, you know, you want to let the players rest. So all of a sudden, half your forwards aren't even playing, and it's like your entire AHL team is coming up. I don't necessarily expect to see that tomorrow. I feel like at most we'll see 5 players total that are like normally up with the team, not in the lineup. So no offense, I'm not counting Isamont, Sieves, or Reichel in that group of 5. I feel like it's got to be like your bigger name guys, like maybe like Zadorov, Mason. Maybe I don't think you'd give your fourth line a break, but like your fourth line, middle stat, obviously, Elias Lindholm, if he had it off, like those are the names. Not to say that the others aren't names, but like they've been in and out of the lineup that I feel like they wouldn't count as who you'd expect to see in, because obviously if someone's out, they're going to be in the lineup. But speaking of that, the Bruins, unfortunately, only have one game remaining in the regular season. Or I don't know if it's necessarily unfortunate, but it's kind of sad to see that it's already at the end. There are 9 games overall tomorrow, and then the regular season doesn't end until Thursday, with 6 games happening on Wednesday, and then another 6 happening on Thursday, and then playoffs start. I don't know the exact day. I'm assuming based off if you look at the NHL schedule on, obviously, NHL.com, it puts end of regular season on Friday and not necessarily on Thursday. So I'm assuming playoff games won't be starting until Saturday. So I'm not mad. But this does feel like a good way to segue into the upcoming episode. I will say, if the Bruins play, which they probably will, before we record again on Monday, I will include predictions for whether that's 1 or 2 games. If we are playing Monday, I'll include the Monday prediction in it. But I'll obviously post that separately from the normal predictions that we post. But if you're new here, how we tend to end an episode is with looking at the week ahead or the 1 game ahead and doing a basic prediction of what we think is going to happen. Sometimes we're close. Sometimes you get like Jacob did last week, where he predicted.
No, we're not bringing it up.
The Columbus game?
Oh, the Columbus game. I thought you were bringing up last game.
That was last game.
Oh, the one where I got it right, except for I decided to say overtime like an idiot.
He got the right score, the right team, but he just put that it was going to happen in overtime, but instead it was a regulation win.
Don't want to talk about.
You were like 2 for 3. I'd give it to you, you know? You get it. You get the little crown.
Yay!
But obviously, there's only 1 game to predict for now. Now, as I said, I don't know if you heard it. The Bruins play before Monday or on Monday, which they most likely will. I'm making you do it randomly throughout the week, just without a camera on you.
That is fair.
Final game of the season. Sturm said most of our guys that were out of the lineup yesterday are expected to play tomorrow. Hagens is playing tomorrow. It's a 7:00 game. Series is tied 1-1. We're playing the Devils. Thank you, Devils, for getting us in the playoffs. Not going to be your fan tomorrow.
We appreciate the assistance because God knows we apparently needed it.
Yeah. They beat us 4-3 in March in overtime, and then we beat them 4-1 in December. Obviously, they're not in the playoffs, but they're currently on a 2-game win streak, so good for them.
So
yes.
I don't know. I honestly okay, so my thought.
Yes.
I'm thinking that we pulled a lot of people, so I don't know if we're going to be how great we're going to be. Didn't we pull some people?
For last game, but they're expected to be back.
Oh, they're expected to be back for this
Sturm
game?
said he's expecting most, if not all of them, to be back for tomorrow.
Okay. Then it does minorly change.
And it was only like 4 players. And then Janot, he wasn't mentioned in the initial list of players that weren't playing, so I don't know if he's like out for a separate reason.
I'm thinking it might be a little low.
Okay.
I think, around the end, people might be feeling. I don't know if they're going to be like fully in the mindset of playoffs yet. I think some of them. Let's be real. I think some people might just be phoning it in. I hope they aren't, but it wouldn't surprise me. I'm going to say 3-1 Devils.
Oh, what the heck, man?
I don't have. Do you honestly have faith?
Yes, I'm going 6-2 Boston.
You're very optimistic.
Well, Geeky needs 3 points to hit 70 on the season. You have a lot of, like, Hagens is playing in his first game in Boston. He's going to want to try and do something. Like, they're not just going to give up and, like, just take it, because also when you look at the standings, we're only 1 point ahead of Ottawa. So, as of right now, if the playoff, like, if Tampa Buffalo, Montreal, none of them move around, right?
Yeah.
If everyone stays where they are at this moment, which, by the way, Tampa is now in second in the Atlantic because they just won in overtime because they had a game today. So right now, first in the Atlantic is literally a tie. They all have 106 points. Buffalo, Tampa, Montreal. But if playoffs were to start right now, we would be playing Buffalo because Carolina is the top seed out of the two of them, and they would be playing Ottawa. So it's also, would you rather play Buffalo if it's looking how it is right now? Do you rather play Buffalo or Carolina in the first round?
You make a great point.
So they're also playing to probably keep their spot because then based off of how the rest of the games go for the other teams, we're either playing Buffalo, Tampa, or Montreal in the first round if we stay in the top wild card. Just so you know.
Okay.
So I think they're kind of playing to stick in that spot. But that's my thought.
I still think. I hope we win, but I don't know if I have faith in us right now.
Okay, well, I have faith, and that's all that matters.
You know what? Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. Which also just reminds me, I know we technically just did the thing to end the episode, but I'm going to do the quick little look that I said I was going to do earlier that I totally forgot to do. Buffalo is playing right now. They are up 2-1 against Chicago. But if I pull up the series recap for each of these teams, I was initially going to do Buffalo, Montreal, and Carolina, but I'm going to include Tampa just because of how close this is. Now, granted, I'm not looking at who's injured or anything like that, or obviously where they are in the standings. I'm just going to look at the overall series of how we have done against each of these teams and then kind of figuring who I want to see out of all of that. But Buffalo, we played 4 times this season. We last played them in March on the 25th. We beat them 4-3 in overtime. 2 of these games have gone to overtime. We also beat them 4-3 back at the end of October. We beat them at the start of October 3-1, and they beat us in December 4-1. So we were leading that series. We beat that series 3-1. Montreal, we also played 4 times. That series was tied 2-2. We beat them the first game in November 3-2. They beat us in the second game 6-2 in December. We beat them 4-3 in January, and then on March 17th, they beat us 3-2 in overtime. Carolina won the series 2-1 with us winning the first game back in November 2-1. They then beat us later on in November 3-1, and recently on the 7th beat us in overtime 6-5. And then Tampa won the series 4-0. Kind of would like to stay away from them. Obviously, I know regular season can be different from the playoffs, and what happens there might not translate. But as we have kind of seen with the Bruins, there are some teams we couldn't beat in the regular season that then beat us in the playoffs, so I don't want to touch Tampa. They beat us 4-3 in October, 6-5 in a shootout in February, 3-1, and then 2-1 in the month of April. So we've had a few close games with them, but also with the way we've played against them, every single game starting from the one in February, we have had the lead going into the third period. Obviously, in the 2 in April, it was by 1, but the 1 in February was by 4, I want to say. But we've had the lead going into the third, and then we just choked it up to them. So they're the team at the bottom of my list that I'd want to see. I think overall, in terms of rivalry, I would prefer Montreal or Carolina. But I think in terms of how we've played against teams, it would probably be Montreal. I think a bit of bias with the rivalry and the physicality. I'd rather it be Montreal, Buffalo, Carolina, Tampa. That's how I'm feeling. I know we technically have the better record against Buffalo, but I think going in with a 2-2 series is honestly not necessarily safer because it's not like you're up 3-1, and again, it doesn't always translate, but it does show that it is a closer matchup. And I feel like that's something I would also just personally enjoy more in the first round. So yeah, into bias and not just fully how we've played against them. But that's where I stand in terms of those teams and who I would kind of like to see. If you guys would like to see someone else, let me know. But that's just my personal standing. But I feel like that is a good way to end this episode. So thank you all for joining. I'll do the quick little spiel of where to find everything real quick before I forget, because I totally was just about to forget that. But you can find Pucks and Power Plays at Pucks and PPs Pod on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. You can find Boston Sports Entertainment Network at BSEN_617 on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And then with an extra underscore for TikTok, so _BSEN_617. And then I'm Liz. You can find me at Liz__Frazier. And until next week, I will see you when playoffs are going on, and hopefully the Bruins are winning in their series. But until then, bye.